Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to the continuation of the London system series. Today we're gonna cover the system with the black taking on d4, followed by the bishop c8 a6 plan, trying to exchange white's bishop on f1 only. This plan has been very popular, and I have some notable games in this line. Starting the one with the very basic game versus Tupelov back in 2007. Alright, so let's go quickly. So how we start, we get this position from bishop f4, c5, e3, and Tupelov here played cd4 immediately, although black can wait by playing b6 first. And then white is sort of has several choices. He can play h3. There are some games where white plays knight c3, but I don't really like it because of simple black bishop b7, and if knight b5, for example, then knight a6. Right, knight a6, and what happens here is that if you give check on d6, then after taking, knight e4, black is basically fine here. Because the bishop has to move, and black just finished the castling. His knight on e4 is very strong. So I think bishop b7 is very strong here. And I don't know. So I don't like generally playing knight c3 at all. So usually what I do here, instead I played h3. And I don't play c3 here in this position. I kind of like playing h3. And if then can black take this pawn, and we will go back to this line a little bit later, because black can capture on d4 basically at any moment, and you'll have to consider that. So the idea is that you really don't want to play c3 way too early here, because of the later plan that I will show you, where black does not play bishop a6, but instead he develops normally bishop to b7, followed by d6, and goes for the hedgehog structure, but this we'll cover in the next lecture. All right, so for now we're gonna, there are 5 games in the system that I wanted to go over today, which is the first game is versus Tupelov, and that's the main game today. Then I'll have to go over the possible improvement, where I played versus Karpov, and then I also played versus Danjaelus, also versus Dominguez and Leko, and there was a recent game last year that I played, was versus the Gorgian guy in Bavaria. All right, but we'll go over them. We'll go over these games, right? All right, so just make sure that there are some transpositions. Let's go. So let's start with the basics. Let's start with the main game, and it went like this: b6, knight d2. I also played a4 against Zagorjan. The idea is the possibility now opens that if he plays bishop a6, I can play bishop b5, and according to the computer, this is slightly better for white. Because if black takes on b5, for example, you just take, and then you sort of go for the structure, like queen e2, castles, and black will have some point probably to play queen c8 and go for the a5 thing, and of course after c4, a5, and then, this is the trouble, right? Trouble for black. So if he really wants to do that, he will have to play a5 first, and then go for this line with the knight d5 for queen c8. So yeah, so this is definitely not what black wants. If he wants to do something like this, maybe he should consider playing a5, but then again, the pawn on b5 is actually just like in any French defense, right? This pawn can be weak, but in general it is pretty good because it gives white square on c6, and if you really want to play safe, then you can just take the pawn on a6, and basically it's just slightly equal, slightly better for white again because of the square on b5 for black pieces. Again, very solid system for white, so you can always count for some sort of advantage. The computer also likes... Alright, so I played knight d2, so we'll come back to a4 later. So I played knight d2, and after bishop e7, I played h3 because I realized that he wants to trade the bishop. And here playing c4 is not really a great idea because black just plays d5, and then he is now better because you get the isolated queen pawn structure, but with the knight on d2, which is less, a less. Okay, this is an inferior piece, an inferior placement to the knight on c3, right? So so that's the reason why I play h3 here. And finally, black has to declare his structure. He has several choices. He can either play bishop b7 followed by d6, or he can play bishop a6, or he can play d5. So there are several ways for black to play this position. So Tupelov castles, and he waits for me to play bishop d3, and I should have probably played a4, which is the computer first line. And again, I looked at this later and I realized a4 is still a useful move. And now black will have to play bishop somewhere, right? Because if he plays d6, then we can transpose the position. We can play c3 now probably. Okay, or bishop h2, bishop d3. Again, black still has to develop his bishop. So we'll see. I really want to keep the bishop on f4 for now because of the later plan that we'll see. So again, a lot of transpositions, very tricky position to play, but let's go to the main line. So bishop d3 was played in the game. And even here, later I would play a4 first in this position, and not allowing black to play b5 so easily, because right now he got this b5 very easily, right? He got it in one tempo, and I play c3. a4 was very interesting, but then I don't get to play c3 and my pawn might be weak, right? So that's the reason why you need to play c3 here. So that's what I did. And now I played a4, knight cd5, bishop goes to h2. It's about equal. I probably personally like bishop g3 nowadays because the bishop here does not take away the Luft square from the white king. So bishop g3, that's why I put the exclamation mark. But in reality, of course, they're about very similar. So white's idea here is that what I did in the game, I played queen b3, queen b6, and black managed to basically equalize, almost equalize, because the pawn on b5 provides black knight on d5 with nice square, right? Because I don't have c4 break. And I might include later game in later lectures. There is also a game which I didn't include today that I played against Kazimchanov in the Blitz World Championship, and I played c4, b3 and c4 plan, which is a good idea. Instead, I was attracted to doubling rooks on the a file and taking over the a file. So this basically, yeah, he plays rook a b8, and maybe knight c7 was a better idea. I think knight c7 was a better idea to protect the rook on a8 anyway and bring the second knight to d5. And again, very small advantage for white, I would say still. Probably nothing. It's very close to nothing, right? Because after rook a b8, though, I get this a file, and I thought at this point that my position was slightly better. However, I played an accurate move here. I realized that my knight on d2 is not so great, but I played knight e1, trying to transpose the knight from e1 to d3, followed by b4, and get to the c6 square. However, it was absolutely critical to play knight f1 first, and the idea is to exchange one pair of knights, or just to put my knight on e3 first. And this would have given white some advantage, because black cannot really take on e3, as this would give white a strong center here, and taken together with the control of the a file. Again, according to the computer, it's nothing, but in human terms, this position is still slightly better for white, easier to play. But if he doesn't take on e3, then he has to play something like knight b6, and then of course you transfer the knight to d3 and rook a5 first, with the idea of tripling, building the Alekhine gun, right? Like this, and then black is already worse, so he has to be very careful here, has to trade the rooks, and then play something like queen d8 and bishop f8. And still, even in this position after g4, because of white control of the a file, you know, he is better, slightly better, almost nothing. So in the game I played knight e1 and transferred my knight to d3. I felt like very cool, but in reality this is nothing much for white, and I really should have considered now just going for massive exchanges and making draw in this position. Instead I went and rushed with the c4 move. For some reason I thought that black is forced to take on c4, and of course after take, knight d5, black is just worse, right? Because after knight d5, knight e3, I ruined black pawn structure and attacking the pawn on d6. However, I missed completely rook f8, very strong move by my opponent, and Tupelov got now an advantage, right? So instead of c3, it just probably should have played bishop g3 and then just agreed on a draw. So let's see the rest of the game. So we see what happened. So queen c2, I played knight f1, decided to give him the pawn, and obviously black is now better because my pawn structure is ruined, weakness on b2. However, the active position of the rook on a7 gives some little hopes, and here I played kind of strange move rook a6, but trying to sort of hit black pawns. And rook takes b6, followed by rook a8 was very close to a draw, although this plan is also very interesting, right? I mean, because the activity of white pieces probably guarantees him the equal game, but I played rook a1, which was inaccurate, and finally decided to bring my bishop to e3, and but black is now seriously better because he has extra central pawn. Still some compensation for white, but I was really lucky that he was running low on time, and at some point he blundered basically queen b1, and the idea is queen b8 and queen g6. There's no way for black to protect both, so he decides to give up the pawn, and in the end, after e6, very accurate move, is just a draw. All right, so that was the first game on the high level that I played this line. Let's go back now. So after taking on d4, I also... So last year I played the game against Zagozhin, I played a4, and we will go back to the structure later. So bishop a6, as I mentioned before, bishop e5 is possible, but I just took here and went for this structure. So bishop e7 first, and knight e5, right? So that is the idea for white, because we're getting the Carlsbad sort of structure reversed, with white bishop on f4 being very comfortably placed. The ideal location for the white knight is on d3. This place is a nice location for the knight because he is protecting potentially weak pawn on b2 in case of black expansion minority attack on the queen side. The knight also opens the way for the standard minority counterattack by white on the king side with f4, f5. And you get an important tempo to transfer your knight, all right? And black can't really avoid that because if he plays d6, he's kind of late in the development, and white can just play something like this. Now either b4 or a5, and you're returning to the main standard sort of structure where white has slight advantage in space, and knight on c7 is not really that well placed for black. So the computer first line now is b4, a5, followed by rook a b1, and simple rook f d1 or rook f e1, right? So a small advantage for white, and okay, a lot of play here. Black has some chances to equalize, but he is very passive, so it's not to everybody's taste. So that's why my opponent plays bishop e7 here, and I decided to play knight e5 immediately. Knight e5 immediately, so that knight goes to d3. So we are both finishing the development, and now black has to choose what to do with the knight on a6. Often, as we mentioned before, knight goes to c7, d5, but however in this case, if the knight goes to c7, white can just basically play c4 at some point and go for the hanging pawn structure. With the knight on c7 will not be that great. But you don't have to rush, right? You can play h3 first, and if knight goes to d5, then bishop goes to h2. That's one of the ways to play this position. And the second way, of course, is to just play knight d3 and return the bishop simply to g3 or to e5, and then you go for the standard f4 minority counterattack on the king side. All right, so my opponent instead, he plays queen b7 here. So I continue my development. Again, the later plan that I came up with, this game was played last year against Rogozhin, and I realized that we really kind of need to trade this bishop on f4 or play bishop g3, because this bishop is in the way of the pawn on f2. So white's main plan here is to play f4, f5, and go for this counter-attack on the king side before black manages to push this a6, b5, b4 standard plan, right? So that's what we needed to do. I played queen e2 first, really wanted to connect the rooks, and it doesn't really hurt much. But here I played bishop g5, a similar plan that I employed against the Mingus in a similar structure. But I think bishop g3 is a preferable way to play this, because the bishop on g5 will get hit, but the bishop on g3 will still kind of take an important control of this diagonal, have a chance at some squares like d6 and b8. So this is an important bishop still. And if black plays something like this, you can play f4, and already black is slightly worse here because g6 is already a terrible move, right? After f5, this exchange sacrifice is just putting black into a critical position, basically. And if you don't play this, then of course white can just go and play bishop f2 followed by g4, right? So bishop f2, g4, then g3, and it's a pretty standard, pretty strong attack by white. Again, I think bishop g3 and bishop g5 are about equal. Personally, I played bishop g5 because I wanted to win a tempo. There is a tempo. The threat is to take on d7, so I thought I win a tempo by, playing f4 and forcing black to do something here, right? So my opponent comes up with h6, which is the best move in this situation. Right, and of course, white is ready for all sorts of stuff like rook f3, rook h3, doubling of the rook on the f file, creating some pressure, and also f5. So I think this position is a little bit easier to play for white, and I recommend this sort of plan if you're playing white here. So h6 was played, and now I really didn't want to face bishop h4, even though this was not a bad move. And just putting the bishop on g3, I just wasn't sure what kind of structure is this, because my bishop is now completely locked, and black sort of makes a lockdown on the dark squares, and I think probably black is okay here, because it's not so easy to get now anywhere and make any headway on the king side for white. Possibly white is still better, because the pawn formation like this is not really that great for black. That means if anytime he plays d6, the pawn e6 will be weak. But there is also potential like going from knight on 6, d5 followed by knight e4, right? So in any case, I didn't want to allow that, and I decided to exchange my bishop, but win a tempo. And now, of course, g4 was probably the best way to deal with this position. Now black pawn is on h6, it's kind of a target, and white, if allowed, he should be able to go for the g5 and h4 really fast, right? Instead, I just played rook a e1. Also f5 was interesting, and I think this is slightly better for white. Probably knight g4 is better, because that way you sort of trade an important knight defender, a black's knight defender, and for example rook f1, knight g4, and white is left with a knight and queen combination and potential very weak pawn on d6 by black. So I would say this situation probably advantage for white. Slight advantage, but it's still kind of annoying, and considering how knight and queen and rooks work together, there is attack potential. Knight goes to c4, if the knight gets to d5 or e4, and structurally wise white is doing better, right? So this was a very logical way to play. But I wanted to connect my rooks first, and of course black plays g6, and I realized it's not so easy for me to do anything here, except I have to be aggressive, and probably I should have played g4, followed simply by, for example, king h7 or king g7, just g5 and queen e3, because if knight doesn't go to h5, right, then there's a huge problem with black. White's just going to play h4, and a strong knight on e5, and black king on h7, it's kind of weak. Right, so g4 should have been played, and instead I played rook f3. I wanted to first improve my rook by putting the rook to h3, g4, also trying to hit the pawn on g6 with my rook, and I was counting on the next move by my opponent, d6, after which white is better, because, I mean, it's really difficult for black to, even in terms of psychology, to play this position, because he's looking at my knight on e5, right, which is very active, which is looking at all these pawns with potential sacrifices there, and it is extremely difficult for black to play this. I mean, if we compare to the typical Carlsbad with the Carls reversed, black is nowhere near the standard, with completing his standard minority attack on the queen side, while white attack is in full progress here. So again, it's much easier to play this kind of position for white, and I very recommend this line. Just, go and try, because maximum black can do is probably draw in this position. But okay, going back to the game, my opponent played d6, and of course now you just simply sacrifice your knight. And g5 was a critical mistake. Bishop f8 was better. Just to show that how dangerous this position is, I made now a mistake. After knight f3, queen d7, black is already doing fine. Instead, I should have played queen h3 and put the queen on ideal spot on g3. And now after knight f3, all white pieces are in great locations. King on f7 is really terrible, and black is basically lost. You see the evaluation. White really is planning to play t5, put the rook on e6, or knight on t4, goes to f5 with a t5 or knight h4. So if black plays rook h8, for example, after d5, he's completely tied up, as there is nothing he can do. And the rook on e1 sort of cuts off black king's escape, so he cannot play king e8 because of queen takes d6, right? So what else can he do? Not much. If rook g8, then there is tactical thing. Now knight g5, there is no defense against that, and white has 3 pawns for a piece. If he managed to trade the exchange, white will have rook and 3 pawns versus 2 minor pieces, which is more than enough. Alright, so that's how I messed up the win, and we will go very quickly until the rest of the game to see what happened here. I went queen e3, and basically, even despite this mistake, black managed to play, to equalize. I still thought I had some advantage here, so rook g3 was probably better, and just rook g4, rook e7 is a draw. So after queen e5, well, it's not exactly a draw, right? So rook f1, and then knight h2, still some advantage for white, still some tricks, but very difficult to play in real time when you have very limited time to think over the board. So I decided to activate my rook, preventing that all rook e8 stuff. But after king g7, I realized that he wants to play rook a f8, right, and then bishop d8, and then he will attack me on the king side himself, right? So I decided just to trade queens and go into the endgame, because I felt that in the endgame I have 3 pawns for a missing bishop, and that should give me plenty of compensation. And in general, that was the good judgment. White basically plays without any risk, and at some point, being a long time, we started to make a lot of mistakes, but that's natural, right? h4 was of course much stronger, and then followed by h5 and g4, but I can't even say much stronger. It's probably more accurate. And now he plays bishop g7. Rook e8, as we can see, was the computer suggestion, which is not so easy to see, because once these pawns are gone, the rook e4 is a huge threat, and now white has to be very careful and make the draw here in this position. And yeah, and this is very, very tricky, of course, but it looks like the draw. That's how he could have drawn this game. Instead, black plays bishop g7, natural move, but after this move, knight e5 was of course stronger. I play c4. And knight b7 was very strong, with the idea of putting the knight on c5. And if king goes, then a lot of checks, right? Instead, he played rook c8 immediately and allowed this check. And I think this position was very close to being lost. So rook d8 check, rook d6 is important finesse. And knight a4, check, g e6. And black is lost because rook and 3 pawns, together with the white king and advanced pawns, are winning this position. And we can see here that I didn't blunder this knight e6 check, which is important. And of course, there was this nice trick here. If I played h7 immediately after knight g5, rook h7, knight h7, and I cannot capture the rook on e8 because knight f6 check, and black is winning because he takes all my pawns. So I was lucky to find this king c6 move, and the threat is of course king d7, which forces black to give up stuff, because if king is 6, then h7, and there is no defense against rook g8 promoting the h pawn, right? So rook h8, h7, knight g5, rook g8, and my opponent finally resigned. That was last year's game versus Zazhogin. All right. So let's see. That was the regional game, and again, it featured Queen A6 and the structure. The plan was to play Bishop G5, F4. So let's see how this works against a different player, a more high-rated player. I'm trying to find this game. Yeah, I had the game also against Leko. Let's check this out. Knight C7, and we can see that it went really very similar. I played 95, Queen B7. Ah, wait, that was the improvement that I had. You can also play this type of guys. You can play this move Queen F3 if you really like endgames. And I prepared this line against Karpov, which was in the Moscow Blitz Championship, right? Because in the endgame with the pawn on A4, White is basically always slightly better. He cannot be worse in any way because the knight on D3 is just very strong, and White manages to play C4. The computer suggests taking on C7 first and then preparing all that stuff, but I like knight D2. And then Rook HC1 was probably superior way to play this position, because after C4, you know, White knight will go to B5 and provide probably some sort of advantage, even though the computer says it's nothing. But again, it's very tricky to play this position. So instead, what happened, I played Rook E1, and then I played C4 anyway, and just Rook C1, so I wasted important tempo. And Black played this D5, standard stuff, Knight F3, and at some point after A5, again, this looks very drawish, but White King is closer to the center. White has a pawn majority on the queen side, that's why I'm moving pawns there. And now Karpov took and played Knight C6, and now he is slightly worse because there is the threat of Rook doubling on the C file, right? And now he blunders, he plays A5, trying to consolidate, but instead he blunders in one move. So that was the blitz game against Anatoly. So knight E5 just features this Queen F3 idea, transposing to the endgame, if you don't feel comfortable with that. Let's see. There also is the game versus Leko, where I did not play knight E5, Queen F3, I just castled, and well, I still played knight E5, but then I went for this plan with C4 and B3, where I tried to just simply set the center up. However, Black is doing fine here because his knight is already arrived on B4, and yeah, and now I just missed a lot of tactics, and Black is doing fine. So this is not what you want to do here. As I mentioned before, you really want to go for that F4, Queen E2, and leave the Rook on F1 plan, because you really want that F4, F5 going. So these games were played way earlier, way before I played last year's game, right? And I'm now looking for the game versus the that was Leko, Karpov, but there is also, right, there is the Mingus game. All right, so let's see this game, because this was played almost 4 years ago, again against a strong dude, right? So Bishop C5. All right, so yeah, okay, so this is important stuff. So my opponent, the Tupelov, he took on T4 immediately, right? But Black can also play B6. So as I mentioned before, H3 or knight D2, right? Just trying to remember how that happens. Oh yeah, there's also this plan. There's also this plan. So let's see how we get to this position. Yeah, but White has actually a choice here. A4, Bishop D3, and C3. C3 I actually like, because it gives White an additional choice now. And if Black takes on D4, you can actually think about taking with the C pawn here, because you have the open C file, right? You have the open C file potentially. If you don't like the structure, this is very solid for White. Probably some small advantage. ED4 is the standard thing to do though. All right. So instead, Bishop A6 was played, and now I'm playing against Danjaelus. The Spanish Grandmaster, and if I play castle, I don't see the way for me to get this F4, F5 plan in, so I decided to do something different. Castle probably is okay, but it's nothing special for White. Okay, I mean, I played it later this game against Dominguez. I think that's exactly how this game goes, right? I think that's how this game goes. Right, that's how so that's later how I improved this. So Queen E2 was played in my game versus the Danjaelus, and the idea is that I wanted to play E5. The computer doesn't really like this plan with E5. He says that black is slightly better now, but in terms of practical play, you know, I'm really fond of this just sort of attack on the king side. It's like French structure, but use your rook on the h file before your castle. And rook e8, knight c6 was superior, but black wanted to keep an option of playing queen a6 and trading my queens, right? So knight c6 was a superior move by black because rook on e8 is very passive, and I just went basically g4 and went straight for his king. And again, black should have played knight c6 and not worry about this attack, because this attack is really hard to pull off, as black is preparing for this f6 break, right? And my king will be wide open. But instead, my opponent decides to go for this endgame, and in the endgame, it turns out that black is actually worse in this position. He played f6. He should have played rook g8, because after f6 and rook g6, my opponent now plays e5, but this is a bad structure for him, right? If he takes on d4, the knight takes, and clearly the doubling of the rooks with the black king cut off on the h7 line, white king basically goes to d3, and then he has a field day. Knight can go to a lot of places like e3 and then to g4, attacking the f6, creating rook h6 threat. This is very difficult to play for black. Like e5, king t1, incredible move. The idea is that now this pawn will be just taken. Knight f3 is probably not that great, so knight b3 is better, and then if knight e5, then just rook f6, and this endgame is better for white. All right, so instead my opponent plays e5 here, and so of course you take on c5, and now he realized that if he takes on c5, right, then this knight goes to h4, incredibly important square on f5 for the knight, right, and creating this mating threat rook h6. So black lost the pawn, and knight h4 is still playable. I decided to play knight f1 and transfer to make sure I get this square. However, I blundered knight e6 here, right? But still, after knight f5, it's a serious problem for black. He plays knight g5 now, and rook h6, knight e3, and the knight is getting to this f6 pawn. He is going to attack these pawns and these pawns all together, right? Knight g4, and there is no defense. Black is losing his pawn, right? Black is losing his pawn, knight e5, and black basically resigned here, right? But there was no way for black to defend this pawn f6 because of the wide open king along the g file. So that's how I played this game, and instead later I played castle, and I wanted to force black to transfer right, so rook fc8 was played. This was how Dominguez played against me in 2016, right? So I played bishop g5, again, trying to go for that knight e5 plan, right? Trying to go for that f4 thing. I still think it's a pretty good idea. Bishop h4. Now black plays knight c7, because if he takes, then we transferring the game to that plan that we mentioned earlier, and I think black is worse there, right? And I'm not sure if rook of fc8 was any useful for black, so he decides to play knight c7 instead. And of course, I can still play knight e5 here, but I thought that now we can play e4. The move I played in the game was e4, and I think that this was correct, right? Because after knight takes d4, the resulting structure is that of the Sicilian game. This is Sicilian game structure, except the difference is white is kind of a few tempis up, because black knight on c7 is not really that great. It should be on standing on b8, going to d7 right after d6. And now white has a very clear plan of going f4, e5, trading the bishops, which is covering, black's bishop on e7 is covering the important d6 square. So this is an advantage for white. He plays knight c8, and of course I could have just played e5 and played something like this, or knight a4. I think this would have been probably... this is a very unpleasant position for black to play, because white is going to play rook a d1, followed by f4 and potentially f5, f6, right? So this is an advantage for black, for white. For example, rook d1 here. queen c7, because if you play d5 immediately, you cannot really capture this thing because of knight e6, right? So black cannot play d6, he has to play something, right, wait a minute, d5 takes, alright, okay, so the computer says knight d5 first, but then f4, and you still get this strong attack after f5, and the position is really, really unpleasant for, I would say this is unpleasant for black, because this weakness on e6 is kind of really jarring, right? And then combined with the control of the f file, and black can never pose white on the f file unless he plays rook f7 here, but then something like this, check, king g1, and then now you can take on e6, right? So white gets a pawn. Probably black has good chance for a draw, but still advantage for white, right? Instead I played f4 here, and this was kind of loss of tempo. I really wanted to make sure that I don't let my opponent slip away. However, I missed bishop c5, and bishop f2 was played. a6, kind of strange move. g4 was very interesting. g4, just, you know, to play g4, standard Sicilian move, right? g4, g5, go for the attack. But of course, much more to the point was to play simply e5 and then queen f3. And the idea is that you basically put everything in the center. So black plays something like b5, knight e4, bishop goes to a7 or e7. Then you just grab, play f5, and white has everything you can ever dream of, because there is huge attack coming. The pawn on f7, the computer evaluates it like +1 for white already. So this is a huge attack for white. This is how I should have played. I decided to be very safe and play this absolutely stupid move, king h1. Trying to get away with my king from the potential diagonal pins, right? But this is wasting important time in the Sicilian where every tempo counts. My opponent played rook a b8, and now I played bishop g1, which is the critical, which is really bad move. The bad move because it gives the g3 access to the g3 square for black knights, especially with the check here. So b4 was mandatory for white. Simply b4, making sure the knight on d4 is unchallenged, and white will play e5, knight e4, and still have some attacking chances in the true fashion, Sicilian fashion, where white plays c3, b4 to make sure he gets this outpost on d4 secured. Alright, so in the game I played bishop g1, but after knight d6, which I completely missed because I didn't realize black can play this, I thought e5, but then of course knight e4, and black wins an important tempo because of knight g3 check, and he is better. And of course after rook e1 he just plays b5, and I realized, oh my god, because I don't even have e5 anymore because of bishop takes and knight f5. This again, the king on h1 and king on e2, this gives black important time to, you know, do all the exchanges. So black is doing fine here, and after b5 I basically lost my mind. I played rook f3, knight c4, and should have just went for this line, but of course I did not see that instead of this move, queen b2, which is good for black, I completely missed that I have b4, and at bishop d4, then a6 first, followed by bishop d4. All right, and white still has advantage here. So after b4, white is better. Instead, black has to take on b5, and after e5, knight e4, queen d3, bishop d4. Queen d4, white is still kind of better here. I mean, probably even just f5 here, and white is definitely better. So I missed a lot of chances. As you can see, this position is so very solid for white that you can miss a lot of tempos and you still have very decent position. All right, so instead I played knight to b3, and black is just better. So let's go really quickly till the rest of the game just to show you what happened, so you guys get an idea. I played f5, b4, correct. I should have taken on b4, of course, not allow black to make a weakness on c3. I had some illusions about playing f6 here, but they're just illusions. And black captures this pawn on e5. A lot of tactics now happening. In the end, it's equal, but yeah, queen g2 was just a draw. I should have just taken on g2 here, and a rook b3, and just bishop d6, and rook g3, right? And probably Probably a much easier draw because I went for king g2 and decided to go for this kind of structure, but this is really bad position for me. I got really lucky that he traded the queens, and the resulting rook endgame is a draw because first of all of h4, and now rook a1, a very important move because of the weak back rank mate, right? Black can take this pawn. He did take the pawn on h4. Black now has 2 extra pawns, however, because of the mate there, he cannot use these pawns to his advantage. And right, so rook h8, there is mate, so that this was a draw, and that basically concludes my lecture for today. So we just saw the plan was the with the black going for this bishop trade on a6, and here you should play a4 first. And yeah, if black gets this structure, then he is doing okay. But even here, white is slightly better, right? Even here, white is slightly better. But try not to give your opponent that. Instead, play this a4 something, and then c3, and bishop a6, and then go for that bishop transfer, right? If black plays actually d6, you should play bishop d3 here, and wait for the c4. A lot of nuances here for white. Sometimes you play c3, sometimes you want to play c4 in one move. So that all deserves attention. So gotta be careful here. All right, so I guess that's it for today. And if you get the structure, if black trades your light squared bishops, just go for the kingside attack. Remember about that 95-93 maneuver, followed by bishop g3 or bishop g5, and then f4, 22, and attack on the king side. All right, so hope you guys enjoyed this, and next time we're gonna cover the bishop b7, where black plays bishop b7 and he does not trade his light squared bishops. All right, so see you guys then.